Are you all right, ma'am?
I think so, just a bit shaken.
Don't worry, I'll take you home.
Everyone walked past the lost old woman until a homeless man stopped. He had nothing but a few coins and a loyal dog, yet he offered her the only things that mattered: time and compassion. His small act of kindness returned her memory and, in the process, gave him a life he never imagined. My life was measured in small numbers: $3 in my pocket. A few hours before the streetlights buzzed on and the cold bit hard, a cold that didn't just chill the skin but sank deep into the bones, a reminder of every night I had spent outside. One dog, my faithful companion Oscar, who was pressed against my leg, his warmth a small comfort against the city's indifferent air. People hurried past, their faces blurred by speed and purpose, their coats pulled tight against the wind, their hurried footsteps a sharp rhythm against the pavement. They were a world apart from the woman sitting on the curb, motionless and lost. Her coat was pushed off her shoulders like a future that didn't belong to her, its expensive fabric a stark contrast to the grimy street. Her purse was clutched in her lap like a forgotten secret, its leather worn but still holding the quiet promise of something important. We were two strangers, stuck in time under a blinking streetlight, each missing something important. She had lost her memories, and I had lost everything else, but at least I still had Oscar and his steady loyalty. For a moment, we were together in the quiet hum of the city, a tiny island in a sea of rush. It was a silence so profound it felt like a heavy blanket had been draped over the city's noise. A silence that held a deep, unexplainable sadness. I didn't plan on stopping. A person like me, you learn to keep moving. Hunger is a good teacher of forward motion, a constant push from behind. And the shelters close at a certain time whether you make it or not, their doors locking with a finality that echoes in the cold night. But Oscar stopped dead. His ears went up as if he heard a quiet whistle only dogs can hear, a sound that had somehow stitched the woman to the pavement. The city hummed with its endless noise. The whoosh of cars, the low rumble of a bus, the distant wail of a siren. But in that small space around her, the air felt strangely still. The air was thick with the scent of wet asphalt and diesel, but around her there was only a clean, almost floral scent, a ghost of a different life. I crouched a few feet away, making sure my hands were visible, a show of surrender. I had learned that people were afraid of me, so I offered them my empty palms, a sign that I meant no harm. My voice was as gentle as I could make it, a soft texture in the rough city. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Her eyes focused on me for a second, then went cloudy again, like windows fogging over and then clearing. There was a flicker of something in them, a brief spark of intelligence that was quickly snuffed out by a deeper confusion. It was like watching a matchlight and then go out just as quickly. She touched the edge of her purse, then her temple, her fingers tracing a path of forgotten words and names. It was a search for a word that wouldn't come out. She looked at me, then at the empty street, her gaze filled with a lost, bewildered emptiness. The city flowed around us like water around a stone, not noticing us at all. Oscar crept closer, his movements so slow and careful they were almost invisible. He rested his chin on her shoe, just breathing, a quiet presence that spoke more than any human voice. It was a kind of empathy that didn't need words, and it seemed to calm her a little. I waited, giving her time. Time was a luxury I didn't have, but in that moment, it was the only thing I could offer. "Can you tell me your name?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Her mouth opened, stayed empty, and then closed again. Her face was a blank slate. There was no alcohol on her breath, no slurred words, no wildness. Just a deep, quiet fear in a face that was blank. Like a light was on, but in the wrong room, showing me nothing but an empty space. I looked up and down the street, my mind racing through options. My mind was like a calculator ticking through the possibilities. Call the police? The price of a police report for a homeless man was often more trouble than it was worth. They'd ask me to move along, to not cause trouble. Paramedics? They'd ask for an address, an insurance card, things I didn't have. They would assume the worst and treat me like a criminal, or just walk away. That was the easiest, safest option for me. I'd learned that all of those choices came with a price people like me couldn't afford. But something in me refused to leave. It was Oscar's presence, the quiet trust in his eyes, that held me there. "I'm Sam," I said, trying to break through the silence. "This is Oscar. We won't hurt you." She blinked at Oscar's wagging tail, and something in her expression softened. It was as if kindness had a smell she remembered. even when everything else was gone. She just nodded. Her nod small and grateful, but also a little broken. I unscrewed my old water bottle and passed it to her. The bottle was dented and scratched, a symbol of my own tired life, but she took it without hesitation. She drank slowly as if she thought a memory might be floating on the surface of the water, just waiting for her to drink it down. "Where were you going?" I asked, but her gaze just drifted across the storefronts, as if she hoped one of them would call her home. There was no answer. Oscar gave a single, polite, but insistent bark. He had a way of communicating that I always understood. The message was clear. Don't leave her. I took off my thin, worn jacket and put it over her shoulders. It was all I had to offer. The cold air immediately bit at my skin, but I didn't care. "We'll figure it out," I said, mostly to Oscar, partly to myself, and entirely to her trembling hands. Minutes turned into an hour, the crowds thinned, the city's roar turned into a soft hum, like the sound of the ocean when you're a long way from the shore. The rhythm of the city changed, slowing down, settling in for the night. I thought about the diner down the street where the owner, Mr. Finn, sometimes gave me leftovers. I thought about the library, which was always warm and quiet. I even thought about the emergency room, but I knew the clipboards there would ask questions we couldn't answer. The woman slid down lower on the curb, her fear finally giving way to exhaustion. Her head tipped against the flickering glass of the bus shelter. I stayed upright, a practiced guard. My body had learned to stay alert in the quiet hours of the night, to listen for footsteps and voices, to feel the changing wind. Oscar was a warm weight against my boot, his eyes constantly sweeping the shadows. For a man with $3, time was more valuable than money. Every minute spent was a minute not spent searching for food or a safe place to sleep. But tonight, standing guard over someone who felt so invisible felt richer than chasing a meal by myself. I felt a purpose I hadn't felt in a very long time. A reason to be still. The cold was a small price to pay for that feeling. Dawn slowly began to show behind the buildings, gray and patient. The streetlights flickered and died, and a soft, pale light spread over the buildings. The first bus of the morning rumbled by, its engine a low, comforting growl. She woke with a start, her eyes wide with fear, then relaxed as soon as she saw Oscar's ridiculous, happy grin. "Morning," I said softly. "Still foggy?" She searched my face, then nodded, her expression apologetic for something that wasn't her fault at all. "Okay," I said, standing up. "Let's get some breakfast." I led them both to the diner. The smell of coffee and frying bacon hit me like a warm wave, a scent that promised a comfort I rarely felt. Mr. Finn, a man with a stern face and a kind heart, pretended not to recognize me on days he was feeling generous. He looked at the woman with a searching gaze, then at me. It was a silent conversation, a quick look that said he understood without a single word. He didn't say a word, just slid 2 plates onto the counter like they were coins. There were eggs, toast, 2 coffees, and a water bowl for Oscar. "Sit," he grunted, and my heart felt a little lighter. It was the simple act of being seen, of being given a place to rest. Oscar's tail thumped against the floor, grateful for the food and the kindness. She ate carefully, as if the food were a test. She ate the toast first, then the eggs, and then took slow sips of the coffee. With each sip, something behind her eyes seemed to wake up a little. It was like a light turning on. "You're safe," I said. "I mean, for now. With us." Mr. Finn pretended to polish a mug while watching us in the mirror. When Oscar finished his water, the woman dangled some crumbs for him. He took them with great reverence, and a brief, surprised laugh escaped her. It was a sound as fragile as glass. It startled both of us. I just grinned. "There you are," I said, as if a window had just opened and I was seeing her for the first time. The laugh didn't come back, but the echo of it stayed with us, a promise that fear didn't own the whole day. We sat there for a long time, just existing in the warmth of the diner. Outside, the morning got louder. Delivery trucks clattered. Buses sighed. A siren screamed across the sky. I thought about what to do next. A hospital? I tried. She flinched, then shook her head, a flash of panic in her eyes. "Police?" I asked. She pressed her lips together and tightened her fingers on her purse, the way people do when their secrets are about to spill out. "Okay," I said softly. "The library." Libraries had always given me warmth, a place to charge my phone, quiet corners, and the privacy of pages. They also held answers without judgment. I bought a day-old muffin with 2 of my $3, hid the last one deep in my pocket, and led them toward the big glass building that always held warmth and mercy. The library was a place of quiet refuge. The air was thick with the scent of old books and paper. We found a table with a tired plant and a view of the street. I went to the librarian and asked for help without telling her the whole story. I've learned that pity can be dangerous, but compassion is a currency that can be trusted. A patient woman with kind eyes showed me large print books, maps of the city, and a computer I could use without a library card. The woman with me paged through a glossy book about old buildings. Her fingers moved slowly over the pages, her eyes blank, but then she stopped. She stopped at a picture of a mansion with white columns. Something in her breathing changed. It got quicker, lighter. She tapped the photo and whispered a single sound that slid away like a fish, a whisper that seemed to vanish into the air. "Home?" I asked. She nodded once, her eyes filling with tears that didn't fall. It was the first real emotion I had seen from her since that laugh at the diner. It was a small sign, but it was enough. On the public computer, I searched for estates with white columns, foundations, anything I could find. The city had hundreds of them. I tried the newspaper archives, looking for charity events, board rosters, any names with a photo that looked like it belonged to her cheekbones and her careful mouth. I didn't find anything. Oscar was asleep under the table, twitching in his dreams, letting out a human-like sigh every so often. She traced the edges of the photo of the house with her finger, the way a lost person might trace a route back to themselves. It was a quiet, desperate act. "We'll keep trying," I said. "One clue is better than none." The librarian, who must have been watching, slipped a granola bar onto the table and walked away quickly, as if pretending to reshelve a book she'd just read. By noon, the library was buzzing. Students arrived, construction workers on their break, and toddlers with foam dinosaurs. The woman with me startled at a child's shriek, then smiled in spite of herself. I saw the softness in that smile and tried to imagine who she used to be. Decisive, kind, the kind of person who read legal contracts slowly and holiday cards twice. I pulled up maps of the historic parts of the city. More and more columns, just columns everywhere. It was a choir of fancy old houses. Oscar woke up, stretched, and thumped his tail under the table. "You're right," I murmured. "Time to get some air." We went back outside. The sky had turned a bright blue, a kind of possibility I didn't trust yet, but I wanted to. We walked past small shops, letting her memories hunt without any pressure. She stopped at a florist's window where lilies stood like careful sentences in a book. She let out a soft breath and her temples pulsed under her fingers, but she moved on. At a street corner, a dark SUV slowed down. The driver's eyes looked at us, cold and clinical, and then they drove away. The hair on my neck stood up. I moved to place myself between the woman and the street. It was an instinct as old as the first night I learned the street had its own rules. Oscar mirrored me, a shadow with paws. "Just keep walking," I said cheerfully, as if nothing had happened. Sometimes survival is just a tone of voice, not a real plan. Back at the bus stop, her purse strap creaked. It was a small sound, like leather remembering better days. She finally opened it, as if she had just gotten permission. Inside were a tube of lipstick, a small notebook, a pen that felt heavy and expensive, and a key fob without any logo on it. There was no wallet, no phone. The notebook had only one line written in it. "By Lily." I frowned, looking at the florist's window behind us. "Okay," I said. "Lilies point to a person who notices a flower's smell before its price." I tried to make a joke, but it fell flat. Oscar was busy investigating the curb, pretending to find clues. She was staring at the key fob as if she expected it to say her name out loud. I took the notebook gently, turned it over, and held it against the bus shelter's glass where the light could make the letters clearer. On the back cover, a monogram was embossed so softly you could almost miss it. CBS. "Initials," I murmured. "We're getting warmer." She put her hand over her mouth, as if she felt ashamed for forgetting something so simple. "Hey," I said softly. "Brains are like circuit breakers. They trip when a big storm hits. That's not a weakness. That's just how they're wired." Oscar leaned his full weight into her leg until she seemed to steady. Somewhere down the block, the dark SUV showed up again, sat for a minute, and then drove away. I made a mental note of a small dent on its fender. We went back to the library, the initials like a new compass. On the public computer, I typed in my new search: board members, donors, old buildings with columns and names that started with those letters. Articles began to appear on the screen. Sterling Foundation gives citywide literacy grant. There was a photo. A woman standing at a podium, with lilies behind her. The face was familiar in its shape, even if her memory was gone. The caption read, Clara B. Sterling, CEO of Sterling Holdings. The numbers for her net worth flashed across the screen like a cold wind. 900 million. I looked at the screen, then at her, then back at the screen again. She stared at the image as if it were a window into a fog. Clara, I said gently. The name hung between us like a bridge. Her breath hitched. Her fingers tightened around the chair. A flicker of recognition, and then a wave of fear, both arriving at the same time. I closed the tab halfway so the huge number was gone, and only the face was left. People don't need money to find themselves. They need to remember who they are. Oscar put his paws on my knee, grounding me in the moment. We go slow, I said. A name is a beginning, not a cage. The librarian, who must have sensed the change in the air, offered us a private study room, where the walls could hold whatever was about to come loose. Inside that small room, the city's noise became a quiet hum. I printed the article and slid it across the table. Do you want me to read it? Or do you want quiet? She pointed to the paper, then placed a hand on her heart. I nodded. I only read the soft parts out loud. The parts about books being donated, the scholarships being given to students, a festival with lilies in all the photos. With each detail, her shoulders dropped a little more. Tears came to her eyes, but didn't fall. You're good, I whispered. I meant that she was generous, that she was complicated, and that she was human. Oscar let out a sigh on the floor, satisfied that the pack was together and moving. What now? I asked the empty air. The easy choices, like calling the police or a hospital, looked different now that a name and a number like that filled the room. Safety meant being quiet. The street had predators who hunted headlines. We get you somewhere quiet, I said at last. Somewhere no one asks questions with microphones. I thought of the only quiet I trusted, a park where the benches faced the trees. An older groundskeeper there, named Walter, would let me sit late if I promised to leave things cleaner than I found them. Follow me, I said. She nodded, trusting the man with $3 and a dog because he had stayed when everyone else had just walked past. We took small side streets, letting the SUV, whether it was real or imagined, lose our scent. At the park, the sunlight filtered through the leaves like a blessing. Walter, the groundskeeper, raised a hand from his rake. Sam, he called. You bring company or trouble? Both, I answered with a small smile. Honest. Walter looked at the woman, then at Oscar, then at the sky. Bench 3, he grunted. Best shade. I saw nothing. His kindness was a quiet and solid thing. We sat on the bench. The sounds of birds and bugs were polite and distant. Oscar flopped down dramatically, his tongue out, just happy to be somewhere with grass instead of concrete. The woman closed her eyes. Not in fear this time, but in rest. It was the kind of rest that helps to heal torn hours. I counted my coins, 1 crumpled dollar, 2 quarters, 3 dimes, a nickel. Just enough for a small can of dog food if I used it like a prayer. Oscar eats first, I told the universe. I looked at Walter and asked him, with my eyes, if he would watch her for 5 minutes. He nodded, holding his rake like a scepter of silence. I jogged to the corner store, bought a small can with a dent in it that gave me a discount, and came back breathless but triumphant. Oscar ate half, and then, in a gesture that surprised me, he stepped back and let me share the crackers that came with the can with the woman. A pack is like a church, with rules written in hunger and love. As the afternoon moved toward evening, the park's shadows stretched out like soft arrows pointing home for people who had one. I knew the library would close soon, the shelters would fill up, and the city would get its teeth back after dark. I needed a plan before the streets turned wild again. We have 2 options, I said quietly. We can go to a hospital that treats people kindly, or we can try to reach someone trustworthy from your world without setting it all on fire. She touched the initials on the notebook, then pointed at the photo again. Family? I asked. The word made her flinch. Okay, I soothed. Not family, then. Someone else. I've learned that the right ally isn't always blood, but just a decent person with keys to a safe place. I looked at the articles again, searching the public contact page for the foundation. One name stood out. Eleanor Vance, the executive director. In her photo, her eyes and face made her look strong and competent. If anyone can help without all the noise, I said, it's the woman who helps build your foundation's quiet generosity. The woman, Clara maybe, nodded carefully. I borrowed Walter's old phone and dialed the office number. I left a message in the softest voice I owned. I found someone important. Please call me back soon. The sun was making gold threads through the trees as we waited. Oscar was pressed against Clara's sneakers like a heater with a heartbeat. I kept thinking about what I would say if men in suits showed up. or if reporters with microphones appeared. The phone buzzed in my hand. I jumped. "This is Eleanor," a calm voice said on the other end. I explained the situation carefully. I never mentioned the curb. I never mentioned the 900 million. I just said that I had found a confused woman who was safe with me. "Please," I said, "come alone." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Where?" she finally said. I gave her directions that only people who paid attention to the city would understand. 20 minutes, she said. I let out a breath like I had been underwater all day. 20 minutes can feel like forever when you're afraid. I counted Oscar's breaths, traced cracks in the path, and watched birds I would never name. A simple sedan pulled up, and a woman stepped out who looked exactly like the person in the photo. She had sensible shoes and eyes that could hold other people's fear without falling apart. She approached us slowly, her palms open like she was greeting a wild animal. "Clara," she murmured. The woman on the bench didn't answer, but she didn't move away either. Eleanor crouched down and tears were shining in her eyes, but she held them in. "We've been looking everywhere," she whispered. "You're safe now." I watched them, a mix of relief and sadness in my chest. Oscar wagged his tail, happy to welcome another person to the pack. Eleanor turned to me. "Thank you," she said, not like it was a charity, but like a deal we had made. "I'll take her to a doctor we trust and keep her hidden for now. Can I contact you tomorrow?" I nodded, surprised by the invitation back into a world I didn't belong to. "One more thing," I said, swallowing my pride. "If you can, make sure she eats. And the dog, too." Eleanor smiled through her tears. "Both," she promised. "I promise." She helped Clara into the car. The woman looked back at me once, as if she wanted to remember the man and the dog who had stood guard when her name went missing. Then they were gone. I stood there in the park, my jacket now too thin for the cold night air, but my spirit felt steady. Oscar pressed against my leg, sensing the importance of what had just happened. For the first time in a very long time, I felt that my life mattered. Not because of money or things I owned, but because I had been there when no one else was. As the car's taillights disappeared into the distance, I wondered if our paths would ever cross again. I wondered if I was just a nameless person in her forgotten night. That evening, Oscar and I wandered the streets until we found a quiet alley behind a bakery. The air still held the warmth of the ovens. The owner had left hours ago, but I knew from experience that the garbage bins held bread that was too hard for customers, but still good enough for a person and his dog. I broke a loaf in half, gave Oscar his share first, and then chewed on my own hard crust. My stomach complained, but I felt a strange fullness that bread alone couldn't explain. The image of Clara's eyes, confused but grateful, stayed with me, a small spark in the fog of my wandering life. Days passed. I went back to my routine, finding meals, looking for dry places to sleep, and guarding Oscar from dangers I could see and ones I couldn't. But something had changed inside me. People who used to just be a blur in the city now had faces I looked at carefully. What if they were missing something they couldn't name? One afternoon, as Oscar chased pigeons near the library, I saw the sedan again. Eleanor stepped out, her eyes scanning the street until they found me. "Sam," she called out gently. I stood up straight, not sure if this was a good sign or if a storm was coming. Oscar gave a cautious bark, his tail wagging a little. Eleanor came closer, a mixture of tiredness and relief on her face. "She remembers more now," Eleanor explained. "Pieces of her life. Enough to know who she can trust. And she asked for you." I just blinked, completely stunned. "Me?" Eleanor nodded. "She said there was a man who stayed when the world kept walking. She wants to see him again." The words felt like water sinking into dry soil. So many people had forgotten me. Employers, neighbors, even my own family. But Clara remembered. For Oscar, it was a lot simpler. He started wagging his tail like crazy, as if he had known all along that this moment would happen. I followed Eleanor to a quiet house on the edge of the city. The house wasn't grand like the one in the article, but it was private. A hidden place where Clara could get better without people watching her. When I walked inside, with Oscar trotting ahead, Clara was sitting near a fireplace. She was wrapped in a blanket that looked way too fancy for such a humble room. Her eyes lifted, and a spark of recognition came into them. "Sam," she whispered, as if saying my name made her feel grounded. Oscar bounded over to her and rested his head on her lap. She laughed, a sound that was fragile but real, and stroked his fur. "I remember kindness," she said. We spoke quietly for hours. Clara shared pieces of her life with me. Her work with the foundation, her love for lilies, the immense pressure of her wealth. I shared parts of my life, not with pity, but with honesty. I told her about Oscar and how he had kept me alive on nights when the dark thoughts whispered too loudly in my head. Clara listened to every word as if it was worth saving. For the first time, my story wasn't just brushed away as a homeless man's ramblings. It was honored. It was seen as proof of how a person could get through anything. When the silence came between us, it wasn't heavy or uncomfortable. It was the peace of two people who were no longer completely alone. Over the next few weeks, I visited her often. Eleanor made sure it was done quietly, knowing that Clara's recovery depended on more than just doctors. It depended on real human connection. I would bring her small gifts, smooth stones I found in the park, a little sketch I had made on a piece of scrap paper. Once, I even brought her half of a sandwich I had saved. She treated each one like it was worth more than gold. In return, she would share books with me, and I would read them out loud while she closed her eyes. Her memory was slowly stitching itself back together. Oscar was a bridge between us, always curled at our feet, a constant reminder that loyalty didn't need any explanation. But not everyone was happy about her recovery. Rumors began to spread in the business world that she had vanished, and that her company, Sterling Holdings, was vulnerable. Her old partners whispered. People who wanted to take over her company started to circle. One evening, Eleanor warned me to be careful. If they find out where she is, they'll use her condition against her, she said grimly. I just frowned. Then I'll stay nearby. I'll watch quietly. Oscar and I know how to go unseen. Eleanor looked at me and I saw that she saw the determination in my tired eyes, the resolve of a man who had lost a lot but refused to lose, the little bit he had left. She trusts you, Eleanor said. So do I. That trust was tested sooner than we expected. One rainy night, I noticed a dark SUV sitting across the street from the house, its headlights cutting through the mist for a second before turning off. Oscar growled low in his chest, his hackles raised. My instincts sharpened. I had seen that same car before. Without even thinking, I moved to stand near the fence, blending into the shadows. Hours went by. The rain soaked my jacket, but I didn't move. Finally, a man stepped out of the SUV, holding his phone to his ear. I whistled softly. Oscar gave a sharp bark, a warning loud enough to send the man scrambling back into the car. The SUV quickly drove away. The next morning, Clara found me asleep on the porch. Oscar was curled against me. My clothes were drenched, but my grip on his collar was still firm, even in my sleep. You stayed, she said softly when I woke up. I just rubbed my eyes, feeling embarrassed. Didn't seem right to leave. Her hand brushed my arm gently. You protect me like no one else ever has. I just shrugged. I wasn't used to being praised. You do the same if we switched places. She looked at me, tears in her eyes. I'm not sure I would have known how, but you? You chose to stay when you had nothing to gain. Our bond got stronger. What started as just gratitude grew into a deep companionship, and from that, into something we didn't dare name. I still walked the city streets during the day, but now I had a purpose. I came back to Clara and Oscar every evening. I would fix small things around the house. A squeaky door hinge, a loose step. These were skills I had learned from a life of making do. Clara laughed more and more often, her memory getting stronger with each moment we shared. For me, her laughter was the most precious gift. It was proof that even a life that had been broken by loss could still hold music again. For Oscar, it was simple. His pack had grown and he was content. As winter began to settle in, Eleanor asked a question neither of us had wanted to say out loud. What happens when the world notices Clara B. Sterling again? When the reporters and the investors and the enemies come looking? I fell silent, staring into the fireplace. Clara reached for my hand. Then I want them to see the truth, she said firmly. I want them to know that I wasn't saved by my money or my power or by headlines. I was saved by a man with $3 and a loyal dog. And I won't hide that story. I squeezed her hand gently, feeling scared and proud at the same time. Oscar wagged his tail as if sealing the promise. The world eventually did notice. Photographers took blurry pictures. Articles came out. Soon Clara stood in front of the cameras. Her memory was back, strong enough to reclaim her life. But she wasn't alone. She had me and Oscar at her side, not behind her. Oscar's tail wagged like a banner of loyalty. Clara spoke calmly, talking about her return to the Foundation's work. But then she told the story of a night on a curb, a dog's bark, and a man who stayed. The crowd shifted. Not expecting such honesty, but the truth was deep and you couldn't deny it. Money meant nothing without compassion. When the conference was over, I tried to slip away. I was not comfortable with all the attention. But Clara stopped me, her hand firm on my arm. "You belong here," she whispered. "With us?" Eleanor smiled at me and Oscar barked once, as if he agreed. For me, the journey from 3 crumpled dollars to this moment was almost too much to understand. But as Clara leaned closer, her eyes steady on mine, I finally got it. I had never been invisible. Not to her, not to Oscar, and not anymore to myself.